What are the implications for education? That's really what we care about, and that's really why we're here. We right now, around the world, have many situations where we're looking at education as a crisis. The No Child Left Behind Act in the United States, Every Child Matters in the UK, and of course, UNESCO or the UN's Education for All movement. Education is seen to be right now in a very difficult and challenging spot. I, of course, don't think that that's the case. I think quite the contrary. I think it's an exciting time to be an educator. An exciting opportunity lies before us to change the way that our education system is structured and to make it look different than it has for the last 150 years. We just started talking about innovation, about it not being about the technology, about it being about the people and the learning, and that we can't start with technology. The important thing is not the technology, but the new and innovative forms of pedagogy. Learning technologies are, unfortunately, not like fire. You can't stand beside them and feel their heat. In fact, just standing near a fire actually gives you the benefit of that technology. We know that just by putting desktop, smartboard, internet connections in a classroom does not equate to improved learning. Standing near the monitors and waiting for knowledge to radiate outwards is certainly or not an effective use of time. Learning technologies are more like clothes. You put them on, you mix them up, change them around, maybe remove a button. You fix them according to what your needs are. We're looking at a generation of interactive technologies that foster immersive, collaborative, situational learning. Learners are immersed in this technology, and we can certainly make benefit of it in our education paradigms. The 21st century workplace will be a global knowledge-based economy. What do our students really need to know for this new form of life? They need to have immersive and collaborative skills. They need to be able to work with people from all across the world and solve problems, and this is a central skill for the 21st century. Unfortunately, this is too often the case. So how do we get there? Well, we need to look at the alignment between teaching and learning and the research that happens and what good learning looks like. We need to align the technology, and we need to align that with, of course, the most important part of all of this, the people. We're going to take a few minutes to look at some theories and some ideas amongst teaching and learning research. There are three overriding paradigms for teaching and learning, and you're probably very familiar with pedagogy. It's what we do on a daily basis. It's very curriculum and teacher-driven, and it's managed by the teacher. The learner is a passive participant in this process. Andragogy applies to a situation where the teacher sort of chooses the content, but the learner chooses the method that they learn that material in, and it's more driven by their interest. So a college or university model is a very good model, because when I go to university, I no longer have to study math if I don't want to. I can choose the discipline, but within the discipline that I choose, it's still managed by the teacher. Hutagogy is a term that's about 6 months old, and it is the kind of learning that I think we should all be aspiring to. It's interest and learner-driven, and it's completely managed by the learner. And I'll give you an example. I'm the director of e-learning at Appleby, and my background is in math. I have a minor in English and a minor in political science and another major in psychology. No computer science background at all. My first computer was a Commodore 64, and that's very old, yes. But my programming skills are zero. And so in this process of developing this program, we're working on for Appleby both an internal blended learning program and an external international online learning program. One of the things that I've been challenged by is figuring out how to make the technology do what I want it to do, not what it does. I don't want to know code. I don't want to have to know how to use Flash. I just want the objects to move around the page the way I'd like them to. And so what do? This is an interest I have outside of everything else. I went and spoke with Mike, my IT director, and said, Mike, you're a great programmer. Where do I start? He gave me a little bit of information, but not really enough. I went to the web. I saw some YouTube videos. They have a great applet on the web that allows me to type in some code to see what it does. I've done a little bit of learning that way. I went to the library, pulled out a couple of books, and I went back to Mike and said, okay, this is where I'm at. I've managed all this process, but I can't get past this point now. What do I do? Spent a half an hour with him, and went on. This is what real learning looks like. Interest, learner, managed. That's what we want our children to aspire to. I think I'm very fortunate because I came through a school system that is very much like it is today. I sat in a desk in a row. I took notes from the lecture that was being presented. I went home and I did my 4 hours of calculus homework. And I came back to school the next day. The teacher marked my homework and we went on to the next lesson. And yet I was able to develop really great critical thinking skills and problem solving skills. So what do I attribute that to? Well, it's a good question. I think that the lecture model has its place. I don't think we should throw the bathwater out with the baby, so to speak. There are definite benefits of that. It worked for me, but it certainly doesn't work for all students, and we need to keep that in mind. Hutagogy is really the guide for some self-directed learning. It's based on the idea that information is easily accessible and that it's increasingly aligned with what we do. I needed to learn how to make the technology do what I wanted it to do because it was immediate for me. There's also that immediacy that plays a part. These theories you're probably all familiar with. Behaviorism, Cognitivism, constructivism, and connectivism. Behaviorism is a very old theory, and it's based really around the idea that all knowledge is knowable, and that learning is really based on a behavior change. Once you know something, you can go ahead and make a change in your behavior. Cognitivism was born out of the computer era. It's a computer information processing model, an approach that looks at learning as a series of processors or inputs. It's managed by short-term memory, and then it's coded for long-term memory and recall. Knowledge is viewed in this model as symbolic mental constructs. In constructivism, which is probably 30 to 40 years old, it's relatively new in comparison to the other two, learners create knowledge as they attempt to understand their experiences. They acknowledge that real-life learning is messy, but it really is the best. Connectivism integrate the principles of chaos, networking, complexity, and self-organization. And learning is a process that occurs within nebulous environments of shifting core elements that are not entirely under the control of the individual. Let's look at it from a different point of view, through the lens of educational theory. Over the past 100 years or so, there's been a common thread in the development of our understanding of learning. The key educational theorists share a common conception. Their theories are borne out in all of these different kinds of applications. The common thing amongst them all is that the learner is an active agent. So what kind of role is technology playing here, and how might technology support this active learning? As part of a recent research program, we looked at what aspects of learning were being represented in the research going on in the field. And these were some of the different mechanisms of learning that were being played out through the use of technology, whether it be through modeling with simulation and scenarios, through case studies, game authoring, looking at narrative through a blog, or working on collaboration through a wiki. This was how technology was supporting active learning. The next question then is, okay, so it does support it, but what does it do to learning? What is the impact of technology really in the learning process? Well, what it takes to learn does not change. You still need to have some kind of cognitive capacity. What is learned will change. No longer will we be learning discipline-type specific work. We're really looking at learning concepts and constructs that are integrated across disciplines, so that when we come across a new idea, we know how to work with it, we know how to look at it. And, of course, how it is learned will be changing. Technology makes more feasible the idea of learning as an active, interactive, adaptive, personalized, situated, and collaborative process. So what does the research actually say? Because really we want to align what we think is the case with what's borne out in the research. In 2003, a UK study of current practice in schools showed that there's some small gains in science. Now, is that because the technology is being used effectively or not effectively? Whenever I look at research, I'm always asking questions that are really quite critical of the research. Give me more information so I can make a judgment as to whether or not that information really applies. It identified the important alignment of student experience outside the school and at school. And that although teachers had been trained, they weren't really using the IT in ways that had been recommended. So perhaps that small gain in science would have been a large gain had they used it in the ways that were suggested. We are also seeing a significant investment in ICT. We need to have a real plan and strategic plan in place. ICT skills are better for students outside of educational institutions. Look at what your kids are doing at home. See what they're integrating, what they're combining. And that the constructive approach favored by the U.S. research community still continues to be used only a small percentage of the time. We are also acknowledging that this is a difficult thing to do. It's a very complex thing. We are also seeing in the research unbalanced projects, unbalanced research. We don't know really how to interpret these results because they're not very good. They're being done by theorists, not by practitioners. We have a significant need in research to improve what we know that works. We also have a digital inequity growing. We have a significant difference in what's happening around the world. And we are finding that there are blurring boundaries. What is media? How is it different from communication? What is communication and how it's different from production? If I create content, can't I distribute it as well? And between the blurring lines between formal education and leisure. And I think all of these things create a situation where research is seen to be not very effective in helping us to move forward. So what do we need from a research point of view? We need action researchers. We need practitioners, people who are in the classroom testing these ideas and these strategies out. We need all of us who are working with kids on a daily basis to be asking, does this work? If it does, why? If it doesn't, does part of it work? Does none of it work? And we need to start looking at case studies, situations around the world that it is working at, and harness from them what will work in our local environments.